Welcome, everyone, to the Detroit Institute of Arts Thursdays at the Museum program. I'm Amanda Harrison, a Community Engagement Manager for the DIA. Today, we'll be looking at women artists in the DIA's collection. Through Her Eyes heightens awareness of the creative contributions of women across cultures and time and provides a lens through which to explore issues of gender, relationships between generations, politics, and culture. To ask a question during the program, you can leave a comment on our Facebook page or a public comment on our YouTube page. Be sure to log into YouTube using your Gmail account. Questions will be read on screen by Christine Mark, the DIA's Manager of Volunteer Development. Running our slideshow and doing program support is Kimmy Dobos-Wolf, who has a birthday tomorrow. So happy birthday, Kimmy. And joining us for the program are our highly trained docents, Kathleen McBroom and Deb Coons. Welcome, team. How are you today?
Hey, Amanda. How you doing?
Hi, Amanda.
Hi.
How are you?
Thanks for being here. I hear that we have a special prize giveaway today. Kathleen, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I sure can. I know Deb and I are both excited to be here, but we're really excited because look at this fabulous prize we have.
Ooh.
Make sure that you listen closely throughout our program because we will be throwing out a trivia question at the very end. And the first person to answer the question in the chat will win this fabulous tote bag. So I can't wait for that.
It's really
Awesome.
great. It's very nice.
Yeah, I'd like to win.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Thanks, Kathleen.
Sure. Okay, well, this tote bag celebrates women artists. And as Amanda said, that is the subject of our show today. Some representations of art by women artists. And as Amanda said, it's a very diverse, multi-talented group who work in very, very many different assorted media. So why don't we begin? Kimmy, could you put our first slide up, please? Okay, thanks, Kimmy. So what do we have here? Let's look at this together. We have a portrait. It seems to be an older woman, very, very simple. She's wearing a scarf on her head. Other than that, she doesn't seem to have much of an expression on her face. She's just kind of staring out into the middle distance. She's got some yellow buttons on her dress, but other than that, there's no jewelry. There's nothing else going on. And look, she's got her arms crossed up on her breast, kind of an unusual stature. She seems to be sitting maybe out in a garden or maybe in front of a big picture window, but she's absolutely surrounded by greenery, like she's outside or in front of a big garden. And then there's just one more thing down in her lap. There's that little pop of color down there. So what's going on here? Well, this is Old Peasant Woman, and it was painted in about 1905 by Marina Becker, who was a very, very influential German extractionist. And Marina Becker was born right outside of Dresden. And when she was young, she showed great artistic talent. And her mother wanted to support her, so she took in boarders to get extra money to pay for Marina Becker's art lessons. So Marina Becker continued her art studies, and when she was a young woman, she joined an artist commune right outside of Bremen. And she did a whole series of paintings of peasants because she really felt that their lifestyle, so close to the earth, so bound up in the seasons and nature, was the most pure way to live your life and to be totally connected with all of nature. So in this painting that she did of this old woman, look at how she's kind of left light, like an air area right around the woman's head. It almost looks like an aura of some kind, or maybe reminiscent of not quite a halo, but almost. And the pose with her arms up on her breast. People who are familiar with portrayals of Mary, who was the mother of Jesus in the Christian religion, might recognize this stance. When the angel appeared to Mary to tell her that she was going to become the mother of Jesus and that she was part of God's plan, Mary was often shown with her arms up like this to show that she accepted her lot. And then down there in the woman's lap, that little sprig of flowers, those are primroses. Primroses are delicate yellow flowers that bloom in the spring that represent youth and new life. So what we have here is an older woman whose youth has literally fallen away from her, all right? She knows that. She knows that she's entering kind of the twilight of her years. And she accepts it. And she accepts it with great dignity and great fortitude. Okay? Now, Marina Becker did a whole series of these paintings with a wide variety. She was a very eclectic painter. But unfortunately, her life and her career were very, very short. When Marina Becker was 31 years old, she became pregnant. And she gave birth to a daughter, Matilda. But unfortunately, when Matilda was only 18 days old, her mother passed away from an embolism. So I think we have a photograph of Marina Becker, don't we? Yeah. So this is what Paula Marina Becker looked like. And just one more kind of poignant observation. When this photo was taken, she was pregnant. So without really realizing it, this photograph came from the end of Marina Becker's life. So, Christine, do we have any questions?
Not at this time, Kathleen. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, let's look at something a little bit more contemporary. Deb?
Thanks, Kathleen. This piece is not a painting, and it's not a sculpture. The Kitchen 5, Carrying the Milk, is a 12-minute, 42-second video clip of a solitary woman, the artist Marina Abramovic, who stands alone in an old and deserted space and holds a very heavy bowl in her hands. The bowl is filled with milk to the brim, and during this long video, we can sit there and watch her as she struggles not to spill it. Marina Abramovic is a performance artist who was born in Serbia in 1946. She now lives in New York. Performance art is defined as non-traditional art form, often with political or topical themes, that typically features a live presentation in front of an audience. Abramovic has worked in this field for over 4 decades and refers to herself as the grandmother of performance art. The Kitchen 5 is a series of videos and photos made in Spain in the abandoned spaces of a kitchen. This kitchen actually did exist in the convent of Carthusian nuns in Spain, and they were very active there during the 1930s. Carthusian nuns were a cloistered order of Catholic women who devoted their lives to God and spent either 14 hours a day in prayer or working with the poor. In 1939, Francisco Franco defeated government forces in the Spanish Civil War. He then established an authoritarian dictatorship and ruled Spain from 1939 till his death in 1975. Quite a long time. The space of this kitchen was constructed during that regime, and it was in this kitchen where the Carthusian nuns fed more than 8,000 orphan children. Marina Abramovic is a descendant from a family of Christian Orthodox clerics. Notice her long black robe that references the traditional clothing of the religious. Now, look at the window behind her. Perhaps this represents the perfection of divine light. With her personal history in mind, The Kitchen 5, Carrying the Milk, becomes an autobiographical work for this artist. As Abramovic herself says, "In my childhood, the kitchen of my grandmother was the center of my world. All the stories were told in the kitchen. All the advices regarding my life were given in the kitchen. All the future telling through cups of black coffee took place in the kitchen. And so it was really the center of the world. And all my best memories come from there." And so, in this way, the artist pays tribute to her grandmother, who supported and loved her, to all strong women who have done the same throughout the ages, and to the Carthusian nuns who gave nourishment to 8,000 orphans in this kitchen in Spain all those years ago. Now, Kimmy, if you go to the next slide, there's a picture. This is a very interesting picture of Marina Abramovic. She's sitting on the left in red. And this is going on at the MoMA. This is one of her performance art. And by the way, you can Google this and see it live. See all those people standing against the wall? They're waiting to sit down in front of her. And when they sit down in front of her, she doesn't say a word. They don't say a word. They just stare at each other for minutes. Some people even cry. It's very interesting. And this is a sample of her performance art. So, Christine, are there any questions?
Yeah, there is a question, Deb. You mentioned that she's carrying milk in the video in the last slide. During that 12 minutes, does she maintain that milk in a stable way, or does it shake around? What happens to that milk?
As you know, when you're carrying something really heavy, you're starting, you might be very stable at first, but it kind of starts to wobble a little bit. You kind of get a little shaky. And yes, the milk does sometimes slip out of the side, and it even pours down the front of her dress. But we see her, she is a strong woman, and she's saying, hey, this is the nourishment for kids, and this is the kindness of milk is the, what do they call it? The human kindness. So she's saying, don't spill the milk. Give it to other people.
And we do have this on view right now, I believe.
It is on view, and it's wonderful. People love it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Now let's go over to our American galleries. Kathleen?
Okay, thanks, Deb. Here we have another unusual medium. But in this particular piece that we're looking at right now, it's not so much what we're looking at, it's more when. When does this piece fit into history? All right. When we look at it, we see a mannequin. The mannequin, either black or brown skin. And look at on top of the mannequin's head. There is perhaps a hat, but more likely a hairstyle, a hairdo that is very reminiscent of the traditional hairstyles that were worn by women in Africa. Traditional cultural hairstyles, an upsweep like that with very intricate braiding. But then we come down and we look at the dress. Now the dress definitely reminds us of like 18th century colonial America. I mean, it's got that squared off bodice and the very, very fitted waist, probably worn with a corset. And then what appears to be that full silk skirt just cascading to the floor. And there's some kind of distinctive in the bodice, kind of a lemongrass colored fabric. But again, look at the skirt. And what is that kind of like, are those cartoon figures? Kimmy, can you give us a close-up of the skirt, please? Thanks. Deb, I'm going to go to you. Deb, take a look at this is a close-up. What can you tell what that is? What do you think that might be?
Well, I know what that is because you can see what they're doing. They're waving, they're walking together. And you know who that is? That is our First Lady, Michelle Obama, walking hand in hand, arm in arm with her wonderful husband, Barack Obama, President of the United States. And they're waving to everybody.
Good job. Excellent. Kimmy, can we see the next slide, please? Indeed, this is what we have. Over there on the right, that is the picture, the photograph that inspired that drawing on the skirt that was made in Indian ink directly on the skirt. And here we have Michelle and Barack Obama walking down Pennsylvania Avenue, waving to the crowds. This was during Barack Obama's first inauguration, which took place in January of 2009. And many people commented on the iconic outfits that Michelle Obama wore throughout the inauguration ceremony and then the balls themselves. And her clothing were made by a husband and wife American designers, Isabel and Ruben Toledo. And if you look up on the top left, there's Isabel. She's in the studio. She's actually working directly on the outfit that Michelle wore on Inauguration Day. And then if you look down below, there's a very lovely portrait of Isabel and Ruben together. They absolutely collaborate on all of their artistic endeavors. And in 2018, the Toledos visited the DIA, and they were so impressed with our collection that they made a series of outfits based on the art that we have. So Kimmy, can we see the next slide, please? So on the left, you see the dress that Isabel created, all right, to go in our American galleries. And now look closely at the bodice of the dress. You see that lemongrass yellow fabric. And now look over at Mrs. Obama's dress. Isabel Toledo used the last scrap of fabric from Michelle Obama's inauguration dress to put into the outfit that we have at the DIA. Now, Kimmy, can we see one more slide, please? I talked about the hair on top of the head, the hairdo. Well, that harkens back to traditional hairstyles that were worn by women primarily on the west coast of Africa. And it was just as unique to their personality as their own identities, all right? Over on the right, we have a contemporary sculpture made by Madeline O'Donnell in 1994, who's a Kenyan artist, that kind of evokes those very prominent, distinctive hairstyles. So in this one piece over on the left, Isabel and Ruben Toledo were able to tie together traditional cultures in Africa. They tied together a first lady of the American colonies, and they tied in the first African-American first lady of the United States. Talk about bringing everything together throughout the centuries. So, Christine, do we have any questions about this piece?
There was one comment. There's an illustrator named Edward Gorey, and someone said that the illustration that Ruben Toledo did on the dress is reminiscent to this person of that particular illustrator. Black and white ink drawings.
Yeah.
And someone else commented that that could also be a Victorian riding gown.
Oh, okay. I don't know about the Victorian riding gown, but I do know Gorey's cartoon illustrations. And yeah, black and white. Those are very nice. So, yeah. Are there any other questions or comments?
No, thank you.
Okay. Well, then let's move on. Deb, what do we have here?
We have something that is very mysterious and very wonderful. This is by the artist Betty Sarr. She's an African-American artist and educator who was born in Los Angeles, lives in Laurel Canyon, and at 94 years young is still active today. She received her formal art training in 1945 at UCLA. She has been called a legend in the world of contemporary art, and she is renowned for her work in the mediums of printmaking and assemblage. This work is an assemblage and is titled Beyond Midnight Magie Noire. The DIA acquired this in 2003. It's located on the second floor of our museum in the African American galleries. The word assemblage is French for a gathering or a collection. Betty Sarr is a collector of discarded materials. She finds beauty in these ordinary objects, and she uses them as symbols in her art in order to tell a story. Betty Sarr was part of the Black arts movement of the 1970s that challenged the many myths about race and femininity, and much of her art speaks directly to these issues. The title of this work, Beyond Midnight Magie Noire, is a double entendre that it's open to two interpretations. Not only is it a commentary about color consciousness in the African American community, it's also a reference to the mystical and spiritual practices of magic, hoodoo, and voodoo that evolved from some African cultures in the Caribbean and in the Deep South. Midnight, as we know, is called the witching hour, the blackest of night. The phrase beyond midnight was used in a derogatory way to refer to the darkest skin color in post-slavery America, and there might even be some who unfortunately still use that phrase today. But the phrase magie noire, that's French, and that says black magic, and that magic takes place in the darkest of hours. Both of these phrases might suggest negative connotations, but no, in her work, Betty Sarr reimagines these words and transforms them into a powerful image. Now let's take a good look at it. Kathleen. What's the first thing you notice in this piece?
Well, I've been looking at this and there's a lot going on, but immediately my eyes were drawn right to the center, to that image of that woman with the bright but very dark blue background and just this woman gazing right out at me, kind of like just very, very strong, very majestic.
You're right. She's looking straight out at us from a nighttime environment. The entire scene is cast in dark shades of purple, and that recalls midnight, when things outside of time or logic can happen. Now, there are a lot of symbols on or around the woman that reference traditional African spirituality and the power that's associated with women seers. Take a good look at this. The woman has a mesh netting over her face that resembles a caul. C-A-U-L. A caul is a membrane that sometimes covers the face of a newborn baby. And when a baby is born with this caul, sometimes people say that child is spiritually gifted. The woman also wears a head wrap. This scarf is donned for doing the supernatural work of transformation. Her face is framed. Look at that triangle of the 3 divining sticks. Divining sticks were in lore were used to get water, to find water, to gain insight into a question, or to foresee the future. Behind the woman is a lace-like sky filled with stars, and there's a tiny clock in the center that has no hands. The upper left corner is filled with crescent moons, and in the upper right corner, there is an owl that spreads its wings. We know that those birds are always linked to mystical spirits. The lower image is filled with mystical amulets and charms. And Kathleen, see that hand? That hand that's situated right under her face?
Yep.
That's generally associated with ritual healing, summoning protection, or asking for a blessing. The keys to the right of the hand are metaphors for the woman's spiritual knowledge, because she has the means to unlock those secret places of the mind and heart. And there is a variety of little images that are on the outside frame, like a twisted snake and symbols of cross and skeletons. And right on the top of this frame sits a burned half-burned candle. In Beyond Midnight, Magie Noir, Betty Sarr not only pays tribute to the roles and contributions of women within this culture, but she also celebrates darkness through the strength, the power, and the spirituality of this seer. Kathleen, so next slide, Timmy. This is a photo of our beloved Betty Sarr. She is known all over for her work. This. I think she was a little younger here. We have some older images of her, not today, but you can find them all over the internet because she is very well known. Now, Christine, are there any questions?
Betty Sarr, you said that she has these assemblages.
Yes.
And she, did you mention that she comes from a family of artists? We're going to look at her daughter next, are we not?
That's right. We're going to keep this going, all in the family.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay.
Thank you, Kimmy.
Kathleen?
Okay. Thanks, Deb. Thanks, Christine. And thank you, Kimmy. So if we were down at the museum together and we saw this sculpture, one thing we would notice for sure is that this is life-size, all right? This sculpture, this form of presumably a female body, it is 6 feet tall. And just look at it. We see this figure. The shoulders are hunched forward. The hands, the arms are coming up. I mean, covering the face. This is just a figure that is completely immersed in grief. And then look closely at all those like dotted lines that go all over this body. All right. And then there are those huge drops that cover the body all the way from the very, very top all the way down to the feet. Are they blood? Are they sweat? Are they tears? What's going on here? Well, this life-size sculpture was made by Alison Sarr, Betty's daughter. And the way that Alison Sarr made this statue is she began with a large piece of lumber, and then she took a chainsaw and she basically roughed out this model of her own body. She then whittled it down into shape, and she covered it with pieces of copper sheeting, and she tacked them on with nails. And so these dotted lines that we see crisscrossing the entire sculpture, those are where the nails have oxidized and have created these dotted lines. And Alison Sarr says that those lines represent the wrinkles and the scars and the wounds that most of us amass as we go through our lives. Now, those large drops are made out of cast bronze, and those represent tears. Alison Sarr made this statue when her father, Richard Sarr, Betty's husband, her dad, when he passed away. And Richard Sarr had been a very celebrated ceramicist and art conservator. And Alison had felt very, very, very close to her father, and so she said the blood represented the bloodline that flowed into her body. The sweat represented the work that she put into it. And the tears, of course, are her grief. She said she felt like she was crying out of every pore of her body. Something else. Through this sculpture, Alison is also commenting on her identity as a woman. As I said, she used her own body for the model. And she shows herself as she is. When she made this, she was at midlife. She was past her childbearing years. Her father had just passed away. She was immersed in grief. And of course, when your parent passes away, I think for a lot of us, that makes us realize that we're going to pass away someday too. It's just a kind of a sign of our accepted humanness altogether. Now, as Deb told us, Betty Sarr, the mother, works with reclaimed, refound objects, okay? Alison works in another medium, usually, obviously, sculpture, but look at what this figure is standing on. That block down there, that is a tin ceiling tile. The old-fashioned ceilings made out of tin. And Alison does like to incorporate refound objects into her art as well. Like her mother, she likes to give refound objects new life. She likes to give them new chances. And she says that she feels that when reclaimed objects are used, they bring their former lives along with them, and they bring along the histories of everything that they've witnessed. So Kimmy, can we take a look at the next slide, please? Yeah, here's a picture of Alison Sarr. And as Christine mentioned, okay, so Betty Sarr, we saw her work. The father, Richard, we know that he was an acclaimed artist. Here is Alison, who's based out in California. And Alison has a sister, Leslie Sarr, who is also a renowned artist. And she works primarily in, she's a painter, and she works in mixed media as well. Christine, do we have any questions?
Just a comment that the Sarr family is just phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't wait to see what else is going to come because, as Deb said, there are 3 members who are still active artists producing art. So who knows what will come next. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Deb, I think you've got another amazing sculpture to share with us.
Thanks, Kathleen. This is very, very special. Traditional portraits are valued for their ability to capture and memorialize the likeness of their subjects. But this work, however, makes no attempt to reproduce a physical likeness at all. Instead, this artist takes a very different approach to tell someone's story and to address the complex topic of identity. This sculpture is called Lot's Wife by Kiki Smith and is located in the Great Hall. Kiki Smith is a German-born American sculptor. She is the daughter of American opera singer Jane Lawrence and the American sculptor Tony Smith, whose monumental work, Grace Hopper, it's a steel sculpture, has stood on the north lawn of the DIA since 1972. Kiki Smith is known for her bold and graphic sculptures of the female body. Her work is unabashedly feminist. In her sculptures, Smith reimagines traditional images of women, and Lot's Wife is a perfect example of her thought process. She created this piece in 1996. Lot's Wife is based on a biblical story from Genesis, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, that many of us know, but some of us don't. As the story goes, so I'll tell you the story. Story goes, Lot lived in the city of Sodom with his wife, his daughters, and their husbands. He was a very good man and he was very faithful to God, but he did suffer many misfortunes. One day, 2 angels appeared to Lot and told him to take his wife and family and leave Sodom right away. Sodom and another city, Gomorrah, were 2 very sinful cities that God was going to destroy. The angels urged the family to flee right away for their lives and warned them, though, whatever they do not look back. As they left the city and they started to go very fast, God rained down fire upon Sodom and Gomorrah, and the cities were destroyed. But in the confusion and mayhem, Lot's wife did not obey God. Lot's wife turned to look back and was turned into this pillar of salt. So, who was Lot's wife? What was her name? Why did she turn and look back? The very sad truth is that we just don't know. She has no name. The story never reveals her identity, or does reveal her identity, but only through her husband's trials. And it never mentions her again. But for those of us who do know the story, it becomes impossible to look at this sculpture and not to understand just who this person is. Kiki Smith used her own body as the model for this figure. She made no attempt to idealize this image, and you can see the seams of plaster strips that she actually applied to her body to make the cast. The final sculpture is made of bronze, and chemicals were applied to that surface of the bronze to make it salt-like and spindly with no refinements. We can almost see the transformation of this woman as she turns her head, looks over her shoulder, feels her feet dissolve into the dirt, and turns into a pillar of salt. While Smith calls our attention not only to the invisibility of women and how women are seen in relationship to men, the artist poses another possibility about what Lot's wife. What if she has a name? What is her identity? What if we look at her as the primary character of this story instead of the secondary character to that of her husband? What if we see her experience as being the story? Well, Dr. Terry Blackhawk, a 2013 Kresge Artist Fellow and the author of several books of poetry, she contemplated these questions, so much so that she wrote a poem about Lot's wife, this sculptor, in an attempt to humanize her in the last fleeting moments of her life. So now I'm going to read a few excerpts from this poem called Lot's Wife, After the Sculptor by Kiki Smith, and this is written by Dr. Terry Blackhawk. Then salt erupted through me, bursting like seed pods, a hissing vapor. Now I say my days will be the last to go. It is the lifetime that's past I struggle to see, not this road packed with thermal brine, a husband's hand forcing me forward. Here I stand, an eroded wife, utterly lacking in grace. Drop by drop, grain by relentless grain, salt trickles down my corroded breasts and thighs. I have no names now. Sister, mother, friend, all sucked into this high, hot air. My bones crumble and fade. Once I believed in the sweetness of salt. Now all I know is its burn, its millions of tiny flames. Christine, are there any questions?
Not at this time. That was a very powerful poem. So we thank Dr. Blackhawk for allowing us to share it with our audience.
Thank you so much. And Kimmy, dear, can we take a look at the image of our artist, please? Yes, that's Kiki Smith. So she's very, very famous in the museum. So's her dad. So Kathleen, what's our next work of art?
Thanks, Deb. That is an amazing poem. Thanks so much for sharing it with us. And we've just spent a little bit of time looking at two sculptures made in the images of their artist's body, both from very, very famous artistic families. And now we have something entirely different. So what is this? We see an object. We can see that the name of it is creature. It has two prongs or tentacles or something going up on either end. They seem to be kind of striped. They're coming up from, are those leaves on the bottom? Those gray and white? Are they shells? Look at the intricate designs on them. And then look in the middle. What are all those little feathery things that are reaching up? Are they twigs? Are they tentacles? Are they, what are they? Well, Kimmy, can we take a close-up, please? Next slide. Look at all of these things. What's going on here? Okay. Well, let's go back to the main piece, if you don't mind. Thank you. This is a solid sculpture made out of porcelain. It's difficult to believe that the artist, Tomoko Kono, who is Japanese, managed to use solid porcelain to create a piece that evokes such movement. The piece is not that large. The tallest prong is just about 2 feet tall. From end to end, it's just a little bit over 2 feet long, but it's only 6 feet wide. So it's very, very delicate. And when you look at this, you need to understand that Tomoko Kono used an ancient kind of clay work that is called narikomi. And narikomi translates literally to kneading. But Kimmy, can we go to the close-up again, please? Thank you. Look at all the colors on here. You can see the one prong going up on the right corner. We've got white, we've got gray, we've got black, we've got yellow. And then look at all of those exquisite pinks and corals and greens, the black, the white, the gray. None of that is painted on. None of that is glaze. All of that is, by using this ancient technique called narikomi, it's twisted clay where the clay colors are piled on top of each other. Tomoko Kono painstakingly made every single one of those tentacles separately. She attached each one separately, and just like in nature, every single one of those tentacles is unique and was placed deliberately and completely. It's just, the whole thing comes together so beautifully. And the museum commissioned this piece for the opening of our new Japanese gallery back in 2017. And I found this quote from the artist, Tomoko Kono, talking about this piece. And here's a quote. And she said, "I wanted to create a form that was born or that came out of nothingness or a primordial state. That could be water or anything. The image is that thing that was born out of stillness. The thing is always moving, changing, growing, and does not stay in one form. The two horns refer to tips or points, which are trying to connect to something outside or something alien." So in closing, I'll just add that the general theme of the overbranching theme of our Japanese art gallery is an examination of the Japanese concept of ma, which is an exploration of the relationship between stillness and movement. And I have to say that I think Tomoko Kono has perfectly captured that concept in this piece. And Kimmy, can we move to the next slide, please? Yeah, here we see Tomoko Kono. She splits her time between her native Japan and her art studio on Bali. And she finds all sorts of inspiration from the exotic sea plants and the animals. And as you can see, here's working in 2017 on a much larger piece. So Christine, do we have any questions about this piece?
We just have a quick comment. I know that we have a few more pieces we'd like to get through before our time is up. But the creature, it's noted, has a smiley face hidden somewhere in those tentacles. And most of us have never seen it or found it. But it's the artist's fun way of embedding a little like Where's Waldo or mystery into her pieces. And there is a smiley face somewhere within creature. So if you go into the galleries, take a deep look at it and see if you can find that smiley face.
Okay. Thanks, Christine. Deb, let's move from something kind of whimsical into something that's absolutely grounded in reality.
Yes, and it's very serious. Thanks, Kathleen.
Mm-hmm.
Doris Salcedo is one of the best-known artists in Colombia, South America. This contemporary work by her is called Atropellarios Defiant. The DIA Founders Society purchased this piece in 1999. Now, take a look at it. This art installation consists of a long box with 4 niches that has been recessed into the wall. Each of the niches contains 1 or 2 women's shoes, and their view is obscured by a covering of animal tissue. These shoes represent the desaparecidos. They are the thousands of ordinary citizens who simply disappeared after they were abducted during drug wars or grisly military coups in South America from the 1960s through the 1980s. These people were often first kidnapped and sequestered before they were murdered. The thin sheets of animal gut or skin are attached over the niches using surgical sutures. The animal gut may refer to the practice of killing the body as a malicious form of torture. The tissue obscures our view of the shoes, just as the lack of information obscures the fate of these missing individuals. Their family never knew what happened to their loved ones. Clothes are the most intimate objects that we all own. Clothes become our second skin, and they give us our identity. Look down at the shoes that you're wearing right now and feel the imprint of your feet in them. Could you wear somebody else's shoes without knowing that they're not yours? Women wore these shoes. Creases in the leather, scuffed toes, worn heels, the marks of those who wore them is undeniable. Some of these shoes are matched, some are unmatched, some are just single. But like the women who wore them, the shoes are empty, incomplete, discarded, and gone. A retablo is a Spanish term for a devotional painting or for a wooden box that contains small sculptures. Retablos are placed on private or public altars throughout the Latin world, and they serve as offerings that offer votive offerings that are honor a loved one or keep their memory alive. In her Hispanic tradition of quiet honesty, Doris Salcedo creates this art installation, this retablo, as a tribute to all those who are victims of violence in economically developing nations. She uses these shoes as relics to evoke their memory of their loss and allows viewers to come to terms with their shared agony and their grief. Doris Salcedo still resides in Colombia. The subtitle of Atropellarios is called Defiant, and that refers to the ongoing courage of the citizens who continue to defy the murderous behavior of their governments, even to this day, despite the threat of facing the same fate as those who are already lost. Very sad, but very, very moving. Christine, while we're looking, next slide, Kimmy, please. This is the portrait of the artist, a photo of her. While we're looking at this, Christine, are there any questions?
No, there are no questions in regard to that, but we do keep that installed in the gallery as the artist came and installed it into the wall herself.
Yes.
So it's normally on view because it's an installation that's right in the wall.
Right in the wall. It's
Yep.
very moving, very moving. Well, thank you. Back to you, Kathleen.
Yeah, thanks, Deb. Our next piece is also a commentary on our social events that are taking place around the world. And this piece is hard to miss. This piece is in our African American galleries, and it is huge. It is 9.5 feet wide by 10 feet high. And when we look at this, we look around, we see the outline of a number of bodies, women's bodies, I think. It's difficult to tell if they're lying on the floor or if they're upside down, or if we're supposed to be looking at this piece from a kind of a height. And we see there's a large body over on the left side, seems to be on the side, maybe she's like in a fetal position. We see another large body in red next to her, standing. The arms are raised, the fists seem to be clenched. Are they clenched in anguish or anger? Then as we look around, we also see a lot of words. It look like they've maybe been taken out of newsprint or something. Censorship, shot, assassination, how dare you question, Ramallah Hospital. I mean, there's all sorts of things. And over on the left side tilted, we see CS 560. So what's going on in this painting? Well, in order to understand it, I have to fill you in on some of the details of the artist's life, Howardina Pindell. Howardina Pindell got her undergraduate degree from Boston University. She got her MFA from Yale. She was the first African-American curator at MoMA. She stayed there for 12 years. Then she quit to pursue art full-time. She founded the Air Gallery, which was the first all-female art cooperative gallery. She taught at a number of higher institutions. And then I'm telling you all of this because at the very height of her career, when she had all of this professional acclaim and professional esteem, and she had broken so many barriers, when all of this was going great for Howardina Pindell, she was in a devastating car accident and she lost it all. In addition to very serious physical injuries, she had a head injury and she lost her memory. And as a result, she started creating art like this, autobiographical art, art that kind of documented her healing and her trying to find her way back, art where she unabashedly started pushing for the causes that she believed in. And we see them displayed here. And at one point in the middle, we see the words Ramallah Hospital. She was talking about not only the sorts of things that enslaved African Americans experienced in the United States. She was also talking about social injustices across the world in all sorts of societies, wherever people lost their homes or their families or their countries. And she stood up for all of these things. And she took outlines of her own body, just like Kiki Smith and Alison Sarr. She used her own body as a model. She cut out the silhouettes. She sewed them onto the canvas using a type of close column weaving that they actually use in Africa, mostly Western Africa. It's a craft the women use. And then she covered the entire thing with a heavy coat of impasto. And the reason she did this was for two things. One, she wanted to create an impression of how the media tends to whitewash these kinds of horrible activities that take place. And also she wanted to create a very kind of bumpy, lumpy, uneven surface to remind people of her own body and the bumps and the scars and what she had gone through to come back on her voyage of healing. So Christine, do we have any questions about this piece?
Not at this time. Thank you, Kathleen.
Sure. Okay. So Deb, let's go ahead and, we have a picture of Howardina Pindell. Thank you very much, Kimmy. I forgot to include that. This was her before her accident. I'm happy to say that she is recovered and she is still teaching and creating art today. So let's move on to the next piece. So Deb, let's do something a little bit more fun, shall we? Want to take it away?
Yes, this is where we are switching gears and we're going to look at something really, really fun. This is by Mickeleen Thomas, and she's a New York-based African-American artist who was born in 1971 and who has long been intrigued by fashion, by photography, and by interior design. In an era when Black women had limited roles in the industry, her mother, Sandra Bush, walked the runway, and Thomas remembers their shared delight in seeing glamorous African American women like her mother in such magazines as Ebony and Essence. She summons these memories as well as the Black is Beautiful spirit of the 1970s in this work called Something You Can Feel. This is a collage. It's located in our African American galleries on the second floor. Here, acrylic paint, oil enamel, rhinestones, beading, and glitter have all been applied to wood panels to create this very large piece that's 8 feet high by 10 feet wide and weighs 80 pounds. The art of collage can be a complicated process, and in this case, the artist does not work alone. She has a workshop with a team of people who assist her. Thomas's initial strategy in developing her imagery simulates that of a fashion stylist, and this is her process. First, she gathers furniture, rugs, and plants together, and the colors, and look at the colors of these objects. She creates this set in her studio, and look at the mix of all of these objects. This really was the style from the 1970s when she was growing up. Next, Thomas poses her African American model sitting center stage on that couch. That woman is dressed in stylish 1970s vintage clothing. Look at the gaze. She looks at us straight on. Thomas takes numerous photographs of her, and then she later cuts up those photographs like pieces in a puzzle. Then she rearranges all of those cut images and makes a unique and new composition and creates this collage. Thomas enhances her imagery by adding light and texture to this image. She does this by applying glitter, sequins, and rhinestones to many of this painting's details, such as the black outline of the woman's figure and the shaded folds of her dress. The final step in the lengthy process is to apply a glossy varnish to each section, thus creating almost a photographic image. Inspiration for her work is drawn from art history and from artists of the past, including Harlem Renaissance photographer James Vanderzee and the female Black artists Carrie Mae Weems and Faith Ringgold. Also, look at that dress and look at all of that, the mix of colors. Fashion designer Emilio Pucci, who employed Black models to make the colors bright of his clothes, is another influence on her art. Thomas names her work after songs and song lyrics. The title of this work references a song called Something He Can Feel. This song was written by Curtis Mayfield and sung by Aretha Franklin for the movie Sparkle from the 1970s, which focused on the talent and the struggles of African American female singers. Mickeleen Thomas's collages can be found in many museums, and our very popular work at the DIA is not to be missed. From her tilted pink hat to the tiger-striped soles of her shoes, Thomas declares that this lady is a model of confidence and contemporary Black women, and she celebrates her style, her power, her beauty, and her sparkle. Jimmy, the next slide shows us a photo of the artist, Mickeleen Thomas. Christine, are there any questions?
A few comments about just how beautiful this piece is and how the artist has a great sense of blending the colors.
And when you walk into that gallery, that piece sings to you. Something he can feel, something you can feel. You're walking up to it and it's so large. It's amazing how much work went into this piece. All right.
And it does shine and glitter all by itself.
It sparkles. It's really cool. All right. Well, anything else? Kathleen, let's move on. This is a piece from our contemporary collection.
And I'm happy to move on, but I have to say I would do anything to own those shoes. So let's look at this piece. This piece is another crowd pleaser. This piece is absolutely irresistible. And what is it? Well, it's a metal box. Yeah, okay. It's a metal box, probably made out of steel. If you look closely down that center beam right in front of us, you can even see that there are like screws that seem to be holding it together. The size of this box, it's 2.5 feet square by 2.5 feet tall by 2.5 feet deep. It is a perfect cube. But what's on the inside? What are all those prickly things? I mean, are they hard? Are they like, like maybe like the needles on an evergreen tree? Or are they soft, like pieces of yarn? So what's going on here? Well, this sculpture, which is called Accession 2, was made by Viva Hessa, who was a very important 20th century post-minimalist artist. And minimalism was an art movement in the early 20th century that relied on reducing objects to their very essence. Hard lines, geometric shapes, very, very solid, definite. And Viva Hessa rebelled against this. She thought that that art medium was way too limiting, and quite honestly, she thought it was very masculine. So what she did was she introduced a certain softness to the minimalist outside. We've got the square outside, but on the inside, she has woven in short lengths of soft, pliant vinyl tubing. 30,670 pieces of vinyl tubing to be exact. And if you look at the outside, you can see she kind of wove it through like a grid on the outside of the cube. So what is she saying here? Well, she's saying a couple things. One is that minimalism may be fine for some people, but she needed more. She needed curves, she needed softness, she needed a textile feel to express her emotions. And what are her emotions that she's expressing here? Well, this was made in 1969, and Viva Hessa really felt strongly that women were not getting a fair deal in art. So this piece, Accession 2, has to do with the fact that on the outside, if she wanted to be an artist, she wanted to accept kind of like this hard exterior. But on the inside, she had chaotic turmoil, a lot of emotions going on. And as I said at the beginning, this indeed is a crowd pleaser. So much so that when this first went on display, it was irresistible. People couldn't help themselves. They would try to touch the inside tubing. Things wound up falling into the box. A lot of cell phones had to be retrieved out of there. And on one notable occasion, someone even put a toddler in there, thinking it would make a great photo op. So now this piece, when it's on display, is protected by an acrylic case. And we do have extra tubing in case we ever have to go ahead and replace some of this. And Kimmy, if we see the next slide, here's a photograph of Viva Hessa working in her studio. And like Paula Martian Becker, unfortunately, Viva Hessa had a very short life, very hard life. She and her family left Nazi Germany when she was 2. They came to the United States. Her father had been a very influential lawyer, but he couldn't get work. Parents got divorced. Her mother committed suicide when Eva was 10. Eva lost herself in art, but she married an American sculptor, and she always felt that he dominated their personal life and overshadowed her professional career. And then when she was only 34 years old, she died of a brain tumor. So again, like Paula Martian Becker, we are very, very lucky to have this piece in the collection. And Christine, I'd ask for questions, but I think, Deb, we have one more piece to get to, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead, see if we can squeeze it in.
Okay, I'll try to squeeze it in right now. Our last piece by Ebony G. Patterson is called Bearing Witness 2017. It can be found in the Experience and Expression Special Exhibits Gallery located on the 2nd floor of the museum. This gallery contains contemporary works of art that came into our collection within the last 10 years. The museum purchased this piece in 2018, just 1 year after it was created. Ebony Patterson is a Jamaican-born mixed media artist. She received her Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from Edna Manley College in Kingston, Jamaica, and her Master's of Fine Art degree from the Sam Fox School of Design and Visual Arts at Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri. Bearing Witness 2017, in this piece, he blends tapestry, beading, sequins, and crochet in order to create an entrancing but very complex work of art. On first glance, we notice that this multi-layered work virtually overflows with a glorious array of colorful flowers, embellishments, and hand-knotted ribbons. It seduces us with its mesmerizing effects. But let's not be fooled by its beauty. While a lush garden can remind us of nature's serenity, it can also obscure a hidden world, a world that might not be so beautiful underneath the surface. Indeed, a powerful message exists beneath the ornate web of threading and rhinestones that make up this work's large-scale composition. It's a message that challenges us, the viewer, into confronting social realities. It might be partially obscured, but yet this message is very clear. What does it say? It says, "See me." As the artist herself says, I'm hoping to pull the viewer in to see further and to raise questions about how we engage in the act of looking. In Bearing Witness 2017, Ebony Patterson uses beauty as a tool to elicit from us a civic awareness of our popular culture. She asks us to acknowledge the realities of those not touched by the glitter and the gold, and to bear witness to the social injustice that is imposed upon all of those who are deemed invisible. Because this work is made from fabric, its time on view is very limited. Like I said, it's on the second floor in those special exhibition galleries. So we invite you to see it because it will be put in conservation. Works on paper and on fabric are very delicate, and we try to keep them, protect them, keep them from fading. So that concludes our presentation. And Kathleen, I think that we can say that the pieces today certainly have one thing in common, right? They all challenge us, ask us to come and say, "See me." So
See me.
we invite you to go and see them in person at the DIA.
Indeed. Come and look and see. Now, at the very beginning, of course, we gave you a teaser that there's going to be a trivia question today. So I'm going to give it right now and type your answers in right away. And the first answer, the correct answer, of course, that we get will win that fabulous prize we showed you. So today we looked at so many women from so many cultures who work in so many diverse and innovative mediums. All right. Which piece that we looked at today featured video? So that is our trivia question. And while you consider that, let me remind you that we want to see you back here next Thursday at the same time. We're going to be having a concert performance, a live concert performance by Mr. B's Blues Boogie Piano. So that should be something. Another thing I'd like to mention, that our presentation today, Through Her Eyes, Women Artists, was produced by an entirely female crew. Our producers, Christine Mark, who was our moderator, Kimmy Dobos-Wolf, who took care of the slides and assembled them for us, Amanda, who was our wonderful, brought us all together, and of course, Deb and I. So, yep. So I'll say goodbye right now. And Deb, you want to say goodbye? And
I want to say goodbye. I want to say thank you to everybody, to you, my dear Kathleen, who I love so much, and all the other ladies that are so terrific. And happy birthday to you, Kimmy.
Yeah, okay. So, Christine, do we have an answer to our question?
We have it says the performance artist wearing a red dress in one slide and carrying the milk in the other, but the viewer can't remember her name.
I don't know. I think that kind of narrows it right down to where we want to be. So, excellent. So, okay, hopefully you've got the contact information, and she'll be getting the wonderful woman artist tote bag that we featured at the beginning. And so I'm sorry we've gone over a little bit. There's your prize. But on behalf of the entire female crew, I'd like to say goodbye for now. Bye-bye.
Bye.